Club is a coalition. Churches, nonprofits, labor unions, civic organizations that come together around common issues in order to build power for change. I mean, that's really the short of it.
Especially in action. I think, faith without works is dead. And then equality of seeing that everyone has a seat at the table. And then also love. Without love, we won't be able to do anything, or nothing will be fruitful of what we do. And then benevolence is the kindness, just showing kindness in a mean world. I think speaks volume, as well as there are so many people that have it in their heart that they want to do something, but don't know how to do it, or where to do it, or how to get involved. And so right now, what Caleb is at the right moment is because we're just a reflection of allowing people to see that it can no longer happen on our watch. I think that the time of change is always now. There's never a period where we can wait for justice to come. We're going to have to make it come. I think that the time is right now because we have so many committed and dedicated people that have sacrificed their time to say, I want to be involved. Not just speak of what they want to do, but actually put their heart and their soul and their monies behind it. And I think that's what has helped us. When you have dedicated people, when you have committed people, when you have people that have found their passion, that's what has made the difference. We have been able to connect people that have found their passion. They have found their voice, and they are using it.
So thank you all for joining us here on the Zoom call and on Facebook Live. This is a presentation of Caleb's Economic Mobility Task Force for our Develop With Us campaign. This campaign started several months ago with our group asking the question of how development in the economy and for the community in Chattanooga can help lift up all of our residents, how we can close some of these gaps, and how we can build a brighter future here. And so we really appreciate these candidates for City Council joining us for this conversation. Tonight we have all three running for City Council seat District 2, as well as Ken Hayes running for District 7. And so we would like to start tonight by asking each of the candidates to introduce yourselves. And we'll start, please, with Mr. Hayes. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running. You're still muted. I'm sorry, sir.
By this time, you'd think you were able to unmute. Thanks for tonight. I want to applaud Caleb for the work you all are doing in addressing problems and more importantly, opportunities. But more importantly is you all are offering great solutions, to some of the problems we face. The challenges of 2020 have really, raised the consciousness level of, the opportunities that we have to work on for the disparities that exist in our community. I consider myself a collaborator and a problem solver, and I really want to sort of work in meaningful ways to, have us all work together to solve these issues and these problems. If I'm elected, I will work with the mayor and my fellow council members on sort of three main sort of areas, one being education, one being economic development, and the other being, neighborhood issues with a strong focus on affordable housing. In the city, we say we're not in the school business, but we all and everybody in this community is in the education business. And I think that, one of the first things I want to try to do is to sort of push that we get a strategic plan for the city's role in education. That particularly involves early childhood development, which is a major issue. We've got to get our kids ready to learn. Secondly, digital equity is something that I've been involved in for a long time, and that we need, if we don't give the kids in the underserved areas an opportunity to sort of experience, what folks, have all over this town, is access to the internet, the education and devices to learn, we're going to be left further behind. In neighborhood issues with affordable housing, I think that one of the things that strikes me that we really need to have is a strategic plan there, which calls for one entity, an individual or somebody to be in charge. We've got a lot of different folks that are, working in that and doing some great work, but there's no strategic plan. There's no roadmap to where we go. And I think that what you all have done, are getting ready to come out with the Community Land Trust is a great start, in sort of, combining that effort. So, I again applaud the work that Caleb does. If I'm elected, I'd love to have you all as partners to help advise and educate me on issues that I might not be as familiar with. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Gorman?
Sure. My name's Tim Gorman. I'm running in District 2, and my background's a little bit different from a lot of folks running for city council. I've worked in a factory for 35 years. I'm an engineer. I've worked in technical management for the last 25 years, and I've had to build collaboration within my team and then externally also with R&D, marketing, and finance as we launch new products. So one of the things I think that it can really contribute to the city council is, from an engineer, I like to solve problems. I really like to dig in and look at a root cause and not just band-aid issues. And we seem to be band-aiding a lot of issues in Chattanooga. From the collaboration standpoint, I think it's be very critical early on for the city council to work as a team with the mayor to make some fast tracks and some quick wins in the first several months, specifically with making sure that we get federal and state funding to folks that need it for COVID response, and this is families and small businesses. But also, I am responsible for developing strategic plans for my site, 5, 10, 15 year. And similar to Ken's comment on education, we need a plan for education. And to me, the early Head Start and Head Start are crucial for having our kids ready to get into the school system. And if we can maintain that course for 15 years, what you're going to have is higher graduation rates. You're going to have better trained employees for higher paying jobs. You're going to have lower incarceration. You're going to have more people contributing to the economy to make it more sustainable. And eventually the city will reap benefits from a tax base. So that's kind of one of the things I'm looking at, and that's under my people pillar. I'm also looking at neighborhoods, and I'm not against development, but I'm for responsible development. And so I live on the North Shore, and so obviously we see a lot of steep slopes building here, which is very concerning because it causes greater issues, not just for neighbors, but for the city as a whole. We end up washing out a lot of soil. It causes damage to the roads. So that's another piece that I really want to look at also. But I do want to thank you for having this forum tonight. It's going to be a great opportunity to share with the other future council members and see what's going on. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Hill?
Good evening, everybody. I'm glad to be here with all of you, and it's just a joy to see Janice and Blondell and Rob and Diane, and I don't know Stacy and Jeffrey, but I have so much respect for Caleb, and I think together share a servant's heart with you all, the way that you all have bound together to make our city better. There are many of us who have long known that Chattanooga has some really big cracks in the way that our city works. And I'm thankful for the work that you do, and I'm eager to discuss it tonight. For people who don't know me well, I do want you to know that I've been involved in trying to improve my little corner of Chattanooga for about 10 years now. Began service in our community with Metropolitan Ministries, which is an incredibly effective homelessness prevention organization. I also serve on the school board now because I do feel like public education is deeply important, not just to our students, but the future of our economy. And I will continue to serve on the school board if I'm elected to city council, because frankly, it's simply that important. And currently, I am also on the board of Chattanooga Neighborhood Enterprise, where I've been leading the policy committee for a year, pulling together people from many different organizations and neighborhoods, including Caleb, to talk about affordable housing and come up with ideas and a framework to present to our mayoral candidates in hopes that that they would make affordable housing and responsible development part of their administration's priorities. So glad to be here tonight, and I'm thankful that you guys are part of Chattanooga. You're making it a better place.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Lee.
Good evening. Thank you very much for hosting this event. I am very honored to be here participating with you this evening. I am a small business owner and longtime resident of Chattanooga. I've got a small company here in town. We're in the sock business, and I am very interested in the growth of our great city. We have certainly made tremendous progress in the almost 30 years I've lived here, but there are certainly areas of the city that have benefited far less than others from the tremendous renaissance that Chattanooga has experienced over the last 30 years. I am interested in seeing us work hard to bring the areas that have not been as favorably impacted into the wonderful renaissance that Chattanooga has seen, and spread that goodness through all parts of the city. I have watched some of how city council operates, and occasionally some of what happens is hard for me to understand. And what I'd like to see is a much more cooperative arrangement between the city council and the mayor in terms of working in unanimity to achieve common goals, and setting those goals together, bringing the feedback from city council members into the discussion as an important part of setting the agenda for what the city is working on. There are a variety of things that we need to be focusing on in this city, and certainly economic development and jobs is one of those. I think low income and affordable housing is certainly an area where we've got a tremendous amount of work to do. And I think it's important that the city set the agenda and work hard to create programs and incentives to bring affordable housing to the city of Chattanooga. We've got problems with our infrastructure that are long running. It's been long neglected, and it is an essential aspect of building a dynamic city, and we have got to spend the time and effort to address those shortcomings. And we've got a good bit of work to do in terms of our schools. That's been mentioned previously, but well-educated children who are prepared for jobs in the 21st century is going to be essential to us continuing to raise up those parts of Chattanooga that have not benefited as much as others. And that's why I'm running. I think it's important that we have people with a problem-solving mentality who can bring a consensus building mindset to the task of setting the objectives and then creating plans to accomplish those objectives. And I'm pleased to be here tonight and look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all again for being here. For everybody else listening, either here on the Zoom call or on a Facebook Live, if you have questions for any of these candidates tonight, please write them into the chat or into the comments, and we will have time at the end to get them asked and answered. Now, this forum is very much a part of the Caleb Economic Mobility Task Force Develop With Us campaign, which, as I said, started several months ago, really looking into some of these issues, learning from current members of the economic development boards that lead some of this work for the city of Chattanooga and Hamilton County. And what we're going to go into next is a condensed version of the presentation by the committee on our findings, and we'll ask the candidates to respond.
Our values or what good development looks like are living wages. No one should have to work more than one full-time job to provide for themselves or their family. Community stability. Investment should increase opportunity and quality of life for low and moderate income families. Every Chattanoogan deserves secure housing in a safe and thriving community. Our third value is equitable transit. When people have access to safe, affordable public transit, they're able to get to jobs, training, education that provide pathways to economic sustainability.
And so what do we want? We want transparency and accountability. We want transparency and a community voice in decisions involving public money that will impact our neighborhoods. And we want accountability, community-centered metrics that ensure that companies who get public resources are actually benefiting our people. And what we want, good development. Good development happens with us and not to us.
The real focus of our Develop With Us campaign is on one factor that guides economic development here locally, and that is the tax breaks and incentives deals that are given as part of our recruitment of employers.
And every year, there are companies that receive tax breaks from our city. They're receiving public incentives to build their buildings and do business. And so we have some questions. What's the real magnitude of tax breaks in terms of real dollars? How do tax breaks work? Who decides which companies receive a tax break? How do we make sure that these decisions actually improve our health, wages, financial security, and life circumstances? And most importantly, where do you and I fit into that? So just last year, the amount of corporate property taxes that were forgiven or written off by the city of Chattanooga and Hamilton County totaled over $25 million. And typically these tax agreements last between 10 and 30 years.
That tax revenue, if it were collected, would be part of funding our local infrastructure, public safety, parks, libraries, neighborhood services. And when those essential public services come under strain, or when there is a lack of tax revenue, this is part of the reason why.
Not that tax incentive deals are necessarily bad. In fact, sometimes they're very needed, but we have questions about them. So it turns out with that $25 million that was given out in tax breaks last year, over 90% of these were given through a type of tax breaks called the jobs pilot. And typically these are used to help attract new development and new companies to the city.
Pilot stands for payment in lieu of taxes. It's basically an agreement between the city and a company that provides the company with a tax break for getting here. So it's an incentivization deal to get businesses to develop here. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing because we want development here, we want jobs here. But before we, start handing out jobs pilots, willy-nilly, we want to ask a few questions.
Do these tax breaks actually create real benefit for our communities? Is it worth what we would lose in property tax revenue? And would the company locate here anyway? Do they even need the incentive in the first place?
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the current process for that and lay it out in a little comic. First, the city hires the Chamber of Commerce to recruit businesses to Chattanooga. From there, businesses will complete a jobs pilot application, and then the Chamber of Commerce reviews that application. So what about the public? Well, unfortunately, there are no publicly adopted criteria for jobs pilots and how those get put forward. And so there are no required public hearings and no staff report at this point. So very little public involvement. Next, the city's Industrial Development Board, also known as the IDB, conducts a final review of the pilot application. The IDB takes ownership of the land, equipment, buildings of the company, and then the company leases the assets from the IDB for a small amount. And so the big question we're asking here tonight, are these agreements benefiting our communities?
You've heard the expression of pictures worth 1,000 words. I don't know, how much this map is worth. Basically, what it shows, anything you see in a color is tax advantaged, which is to say it doesn't pay property taxes the way you and I do. I'm not saying they're not paying their fair share. There's some good reasons why some of them are not, but you can see when you take those properties out of the mix that the burden falls to the rest of us, to small businesses, to homeowners and all like that. So also given the fact that, as we said earlier, that this represents about $25 million just in tax incentives, we need to be really careful before we add more color to this map. As we've said earlier, we're not against all tax incentives, but we believe we need to be strategic. We need to make sure that any incentive, and we're talking specifically here about jobs pilots, that there is significant public benefit in terms of the number of jobs, the investment, but also the wages of these jobs. And also we need to make sure that the but-for test is met. The but-for test means without the incentive, we wouldn't be here. We feel like that some of the pilots that we've given in the past, the company likely would have located regardless. It was more the sort of the icing on the cake, and the cake was already baked. So we need to be really careful. We need to be strategic, we believe, in the future.
And so for our first question, leading out of that short presentation, Janice, would you take it from here?
Thank you, Rob. And it's good to see you, Jenny. It's nice to see each of you here tonight. Well, my first question is, as we've researched and talked to a variety of stakeholders about our current processes for granting tax incentives, we were surprised by the lack of information provided to both the public and to key decision makers. So my two questions, really, it's two parts. Were there specific items in our Develop With Us presentation that you were surprised to learn? And secondly, were there any changes you would make in the process?
Here we might start with you, Mr. Lee. And I would ask each of you to please keep your responses under 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. In response to the first half of the question, I would say the one thing that surprised me was the fact that the jobs pilot was actually 90% plus of the incentives that the city issues. I knew that the jobs pilot programs were significant. However, I did not realize that it represented the vast bulk of those programs. Certainly with regards to changes, there's no question we need more transparency in this process. We need to make sure that the community is aware of what's going on, that the council is aware of what's going on, and that there is thorough information provided for the public to be able to make informed decisions as to whether or not these tax incentives, in fact, are beneficial to the community or not. And that would be my primary response to the major change that we need to make.
Thank you.
Ms. Hill?
Well, this is not the first time that I've seen this presentation, and I get something new from it each time. But I'll point out what stood out to me as the most interesting thing to contemplate moving forward, beyond the clearness that we need to make sure we have obvious criteria. But I'm interested in the black box, really, that is the chamber recruiting, because what we don't know is what goes in and doesn't make the cut. And so in addition to having a more transparent process for how we ultimately award a pilot, I think we need to be pretty intentional about how the chamber works and vets a company as good enough or appropriate for Hamilton County. Because what I've seen in my work with school board and elsewhere is that we have lenses that kind of color the decisions that we make. And we don't know right now if we're potentially keeping companies out of the running for these, you know, and as much as there are potentially pilots that haven't delivered results, I would ask, what companies might we have turned away that could really bring remarkable value to our community? And knowing that the city has determined that it has an inherently discriminatory purchasing process, I would wonder, what could we learn from our economic development recruitment process as well, as it relates to how we decide who's the right fit for Chattanooga.
Thank you. Mr. Gorman?
Sure. What was really eye-opening for me was the explanation of why the city council has in effect been rubber stamping pilot programs. You know, I've lived here for 24 years and I've seen a lot of these go through, and it's just like, I hear people complaining about it, I hear groups complaining about it, but I just didn't understand the position that the city council and the county commission's been put into, and that they're being asked to sign off on something without any public input, without any set criteria. And it just puts them in a tough position because it's like it's all done, you know, it's a done deal. They just have to stamp it. And they don't have the chance to say, whoa, let's take a look at this. Let's analyze this. Let's see what really is here. There's really no mechanism. So if we can create a mechanism and make that part of the process, it's easier for the council and the commission members to say, let's really evaluate and let's see if this is truly a good thing for Chattanooga. So it comes back to about transparency. It's how our dollars are being used. And that's the reason I'm running for city council. I want to re-engineer Chattanooga. And I'm a big believer that data and best practices and strategic planning will do that. So obviously I'm not a fan of doing tax breaks when they don't make economic sense. So that's, in summary, that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes?
Yeah, I'm like Tim. I had been reading or seeing them, but I really hadn't dived deep. I was definitely surprised that there, isn't, formal public input. Was, surprised really that there was no criteria, that we made decisions. And I think that with criteria, it takes a lot of sort of pressure off the, the work that you're doing and Helen's doing as well, as if we have that where we follow it. And then I think also that, just that there's no cost benefit analysis that's publicly, discussed or debated. So those were sort of, as I looked into this more, sort of surprises. I do believe that Caleb has had and ATM and Helen have had a good impact. It's my understanding, and Helen can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there was any industrial or job pilots created in 2020. I mean, I think that was that we've had a lot of announcements and whatever. I think that it was true. I think that the chamber really probably was overly generous in working with pilot agreements, and I think you've had some impact on that. What we haven't talked about though is also the housing pilots, and I think that there's been some changes that have been made as far as AMI and what's required. I personally worked on helping the developers lobby and talk with and educate folks at county commission and city council on the Patton Towers pilot, which I think is exactly the way we ought to be using housing pilots. I think Chestnut Flats was another good project. And so I think that again in a government we're making incremental changes. I think you've had an impact, but I do believe that that we ought to be more transparent. We ought to have public meetings. We ought to have criteria for this, and we ought to have cost benefit analysis.
I have a follow-up question as well. Do you have any specific ideas about how you would involve and engage your constituents in this decision-making process?
Is that to me?
To all of you.
Oh.
Yeah, take it away, please.
Oh, I think having more interaction, with Caleb, with ATM, is definitely how you do that. I think that, particularly when you have these projects that are getting, they're, going to go into a neighborhood and affect it. I mean, I think there's a difference probably in something that, locates in Enterprise South and something that maybe locates in Avondale or, Alton Park. But I think that clearly, involving your neighborhood organizations, and involving, the various, folks that, that believe this is an issue, that where we've got to have more impact, is that we do that. I think that, one of the things I feel strongly about, in the district that I'm running in is that we've got, some really good neighborhood organizations and some that need a lot of support and beefing up. And I think that, if we can involve more of the religious leaders, involve more of the labor leaders involved, and just get more people involved, that would be a good thing. And I think that's the way we, it's hard to, take this group, and this group and try to, if we can all work together, then we'll have more impact in doing that. And so, I'm all for, working together. I'm all for collaboration, and I will do my part to, be sure everybody, gets a seat at the table that wants one.
And any of the other candidates, and on how do you think is the most productive or right way to involve constituents in these kinds of discussions in the public interest?
Rob, I'll hop in. Clearly, the city council is going to be the best conduit to making sure that these pilot programs that are being considered are brought to the citizens. I think it certainly should be part of the process that the council is included early in the development and consideration of pilot programs, with the councilmen then taking it to their community organizations and other groups within the districts for the opportunity to create some input.
I would like to add, I think that we should go directly to folks and make, basically before something is even going to the city council, the proposal for pilot is actually reviewed by the public through open houses, or even a forum like this, where people can understand what the pros and cons are. Is this going to create jobs? Is this going to, how long are we going to give them tax breaks? And at that point, feed back to the city council, because I think individuals may have a deeper insight of what the impact is going to be directly into their areas, as opposed to the city council representative.
I think Tim and Thomas are on the right track with their ideas, as well as Ken. Creating a culture where, as a city, we welcome different kinds of voices to the table is fundamental here. And that process takes more time. It is more difficult. And what I have found is that it yields a better result. There are many ways that we can get people plugged in. And I think it's always important to be thoughtful when you're developing a feedback process to help people plug in at the place where they have the information they need to be genuinely invested in the conversation and really understand. And so what I would not want us to have is a check the box, yes, we did a survey, or check the box, yes, we did a community meeting, but in fact that there is a real commitment to listening to the voices of the people, because it's our community together.
Thank you all so much.
And now moving on from that issue, but not with a complete disconnect, Helen, you have our next question.
I do. First of all, I'd like to thank the candidates for being here. I've been very impressed with the answers to the questions so far. This has been an excellent forum. My question is this. Currently, Chattanooga functions under a strong mayor form of government, with the mayor providing primary direction and the city council providing advice and final consent for plans put forward by the mayor's office. Question: how would you interact and work with the mayor to help ensure that your constituents' voices are being represented?
And here we might start with you, Mr. Gorman.
Sure. So I think the key thing is, as a city council, and this is where I've talked earlier about the collaboration, we need to be working well with the mayor. And I think once having our constituents' concerns, we share those not only with the council, but with the mayor. And I would like to see more, I'll call it joint meetings between the mayor and the city council rather than kind of handoffs. And so I think, having the, once we get through COVID, having the bodies in the same room or on Zoom together. But I think working together and not just doing handoffs is going to be much more critical to getting my constituents' information and concerns to the mayor.
Ms. Hill?
I would hope that the people of Chattanooga will elect a mayor who sees the council as an extension of their constituents. And I tend to be pretty process driven. Tim and I have talked about how I'm the daughter of an engineer, and I could have been one if I'd wanted to be, my mother says. But so I am somebody that does like rhythm. And I think that I will be seeking out a regular meeting time with the mayor to talk about the issues of District 2 and the issues of Chattanooga as a whole. I have a regular cadence with our superintendent of schools where we talk every Wednesday at a specific time. And then we talk in addition, throughout the week as necessary. And so I would expect something similar. And as it relates to how I will reach out and participate with constituents, I intend to create a District 2 advisory where each of the we'll have representation from each of the neighborhood associations, so that we're talking at a regular cadence, regardless of whether the neighborhood association is meeting or not, because we all know that neighborhoods have folks that can spread the word. And so that's going to help me facilitate conversation to the neighborhoods, and more importantly, for the neighborhoods to be able to participate on a regular basis in an easy way, not at a late evening Zoom, but to be able to really do something that works for everybody.
Mr. Lee?
One of the things I think that has been one of the roadblocks to the advancement of a variety of agenda items in the city in recent years has been the fact that we've not had the level of cooperation between the mayor's office and the city council that I think needs to occur and is healthy. My conversations with many of the folks who are running for mayor lead me to be very optimistic that that paradigm will shift after the election. I feel very encouraged that there will be a dramatic improvement in the level of cooperation and the level of interaction between the council and the mayor's office, which I think is essential. The council sits in a position to access the community and to bring their concerns and their principal ideas to the mayor's office. As was mentioned, we've got a strong mayor form of government, and the mayor does set the agenda. But if he's taking the feedback and working with the council closely, then ultimately the result is going to be far more productive and far more reflective of what the citizens of Chattanooga are looking for. And if I'm elected, that is something that I will work very hard to make sure is part and parcel of the daily interaction and daily process of the council.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes?
Yeah, and like Tom, I'm optimistic with the candidates that are running for mayor and what they've said about council and their relationship. I've worked with over or almost half of the folks running for mayor, and not just know them or whatever, but worked on projects there. For those that don't know, I served as chief of staff for John Kinsey when he was mayor. And John took the attitude that council was, it was a partnership, that we all need to work together. He had an open door policy. We had regular meetings with city council, both one-on-ones and with working groups that we regularly had. I feel that we can, that in working with them, it's not just working with the mayor, but it's working with his administrators. And so, I think the relationship that we've got to form is it's not just with the mayor or his chief of staff or his office. It's also with the administrators that sort of execute the policy. And so, I'm one that will be not bashful at all with sitting with who the next mayor is and telling them, how we did it. I mean, everybody's got their own style, but I think is that the 9 members of council need to be, joined at the hip and be partners. We're going to have times when we disagree, but what we've got to find out is where we can agree on issues and go work forward. And I think that's, at least in the conversations and the forums I've watched for the mayors, we've got a good group of people that will work closely with council. I mean, that's working together works. It really does. And so I will be somebody that will help sit down and give whatever advice I have and hope they take it.
I have a follow-up question now. Council members are expected to do the work of representing their district and the city, while many are often working full-time jobs. We know you cannot be expected to be experts on every issue. Can you think of forms of additional independent support that you would expect the mayor or like for the mayor to provide for council members to help ensure you have the information needed to do your job well?
And that's for any of you who might have a particular idea.
I'll go first. I think, one of the things that and I'm not sure when it was abolished, and hadn't really followed that timeline, but one of the areas that we do, because a lot of this is so policy driven, is that there used to be on council a policy analyst, and that has disappeared. That we need somebody that can help advise council and can do sort of that research. I think they've got a great staff right now, but I think we're lacking that. I think the other thing sometimes that you wonder and you look at when you look at some of these issues is I think that perhaps the city council ought to consider, and this is something that I want to spend more time thinking about and talking with my colleagues if I'm elected, is that the city council probably needs its own city attorney, because often there's a conflict of interest sometimes where you've got a city attorney that represents both the administration and the city council. There might be other ideas. I've listened to a couple of the other forums that you all have had, and I've heard some, but I think those are for sure a policy analyst is something that I think the city council ought to have, and I'm open for discussion and want to listen to sort of the arguments, pros and cons for a city attorney.
I wrote down those 2 exact same things.
Attorney
and policy researcher / analyst. I agree wholeheartedly.
I would concur. The one thing I might add would be with regard to the policy analyst. It would certainly seem relevant to me that person have accounting and bookkeeping skills with an eye toward being able to provide analytical work on the financial side of policies and proposals as well.
And Tom, I was going to kind of follow up with that. Even a financial auditor, so much is financially driven in this city, and to have an auditor and to make sure we know where the money's going to and it's going to the right places.
Thank you all. And these are exactly the sorts of forward-looking ideas that we are really excited to come out of these forums. And this has been a terrific conversation. We're going to go into a lightning round with our last set of questions for this evening, and then we'll invite each of you to please make closing statements, and we'll have a blessed rest of your evening. But here I'm going to ask if we go in just as a round robin in whatever order, but make sure to catch each of you. We are looking for one word answers here. First, if elected, will you commit to develop and implement clear, enforceable, publicly accessible criteria for any new jobs pilots?
Yes.
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 Will you help ensure that City Council, relevant boards, and the general public have thorough written information outlining exactly how a proposed tax break will benefit the public?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Will you ensure that this information is provided well ahead of any vote on a pilot, TIF, or other form of public incentive?
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
Will you support an effort to require relevant boards and City Council, the IDB and the HEB, to hold public hearings for their respective pilot proposals?
Yes.
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 And would you work with Caleb to help identify and set clear expectations for appointees to the IDB and HEB boards?
Yes.
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 Thank you very much. Because again, this Develop With Us campaign by the Caleb Economic Mobility Task Force will continue well into the next administration. And we are very grateful to each of you for joining us in this conversation now, to go on the record and to help provide some of these ideas that will lead us forward in how we should all think about this work, about how economic development serves the public interest and what can really ensure a brighter future for all of Chattanooga City residents. And so here, we would like to invite each of you to give any closing statement to close us out for the evening. And again, we really appreciate your time, and for everybody else on the call tonight, you can visit the Caleb website for more information on our work and to stay involved. Remember that early voting begins on February 10th and the election is on March 2nd. So, thank you. Mr. Hayes, for closing statements.
Yeah, I again just want to thank you, Rob, and all your partners here tonight for this forum. It's you all are doing great work in this community. There's a lot of issues you all work on that we didn't talk about tonight, and some that I'm not as familiar with, or diving deep. And so I'd like to sort of say that if I'm successful in my run, that one of the first meetings I would like to have is to sit down with Caleb and understand some of the other issues. Particularly, I mean, and I had a chance to talk with Michael Gillen, a week or so ago, just on sort of his thoughts on the community land trust, because I think that's a real important piece of the puzzle for what we're looking at in affordable housing. And so I just, again, thank you all for what you do. I look forward to sort of being a partner and learning from you. I mean, we might not agree on everything, but that if we don't have a conversation and we don't talk, we don't move forward. So I thank you again for the work y'all are doing. It's good to see you again. Also, it's been a long time. So
thank you, Mr. Lee.
I'd like to echo Ken's comments. Thank you so much for having us this evening. It's been a enjoyable discussion. Always nice to learn more about your group and the broad spectrum of activities you're involved in. There's no question that development and getting it right is of paramount importance to the city. And clearly the process we've got in place has got shortcomings and opportunities for improvement. And certainly, I think that to make sure that these types of agreements are handled properly, with the best advantages to the city and at the same time are attractive to the companies we're trying to bring here is of critical importance, and we've just got to get it right. And I think you guys are going to play an important part in the process of making sure that it's done correctly. And thank you for including me this evening.
Thank you. Ms. Hill.
As I sit here, I'm so thankful that every candidate from District 2 was here. And I'm thankful that no matter who the people of District 2 chooses, that this is something that will have an indelible mark on the future of development in Chattanooga. This is really exciting stuff. So thanks for letting me be a part of it. And I look forward to serving with you guys in the future.
Now, Mr. Gorman for the last word.
Sure. First of all, I want to thank all of Caleb for inviting us. Much like Jenny, I want to thank the opportunity to talk with my fellow candidates. It's always good to hear folks' insight. I really appreciate what Caleb is doing. Development is critical to the future of Chattanooga, but even more critical is the proper development. So I think that we're going down the right path on that. And I truly look forward to working with Caleb in the future, be it as a city council representative or as a private citizen in the coming years. So I really appreciate what you do for Chattanooga. Thank you.
And again, we really appreciate you all taking this time with us this evening. Please, everybody, stay safe and remember to vote.
Thank you.